Mary Lucille Baker chatting with Angela Flack.
I'm here today. I'm about to have a conversation with Angela Flack. I met her at Conscious Living in Sydney a few months ago, and then she's subsequently been to Conscious Living in Perth. The other day you were telling me that you were told off in class all the time.
For talking too much.
Talking too much.
And so
you talk really quickly.
Sorry.
Did you write really quickly as well?
No, I wish I could talk quicker, just for the record. I feel like that my mouth's really slow compared to how quickly my brain's going.
Were you heading in some other path first before you started with the book and with your
Yeah, I was doing psychology, and then I started traveling, and I really wanted to travel more. And I did like the Vipassana. I guess this is very like cerebral, and I was really working on like Vipassana is like silent meditation, talking less, breathing less, being more in flow, and like cooking and eating and doing things in nature.
So what was the defining moment when you realised I can't do this psych anymore, or whatever, I'm going to work from my heart? Whatever that is.
The defining moment, the exact moment I can pin it down to, is when I watched a video of one of the Amazon tribes meeting white people for the first time, and they're like dark skin, amazing bone structure, they're very animalistic, the way they move is very graceful and strong, and the white people have like a digital camera, some rice and a box of matches. Tribal people, they come in and they're very afraid and curious, but then they kind of look at it as as if it's magic that's better than them, and then they kind of adopt it in. The Western culture has been really detrimental to a lot of people's spiritual, emotional and physical health. I wanted them to go back to where they were and to honour the culture that they already had, because Western culture with the commercialization, industrialization and Hollywood is actually quite empty, and that what they had was more holistic and richer. Kind of getting ashamed of their culture, like Aboriginals or the Native Americans, the way that they were. Their levels of heart disease, obesity and diabetes have absolutely skyrocketed since they've like adopted Western culture. So yeah.
So how old were you when you had that?
When that all happened?
When you started moving?
That would have been I'd say early 2012. I started Edible. So before then I'd said that I wanted to make a recipe book, and I'd said that I wanted to kind of put together the things that I'd started cooking. But it was in that moment that it really crystallized the fact that I feel like that we're really going in the wrong direction, and that I wanted to kind of focus my energies in response to that kind of heartbreak and that feeling of, oh, okay, well, I'm going to have to feel okay with myself and the world and life, I'm going to have to concentrate my energies into doing something to kind of help with that and reverse that. I thought that I was going to write the book in 3 to 6 months, and it took 22 months, which is like the gestation period of an elephant. And I do feel like that I gave birth to an elephant. I didn't have a boyfriend, I didn't have a social life. My mum would call and I'd say, I can't talk, I'm reading journal articles. This was really a way for me to consolidate together all of the different problems that I see affecting people on all different levels. So whether it be mentally from a psychology perspective, whether it be physically or spiritually, I think all of those problems can be tied together, and a lot of it comes from industrialization or commercialization. And I really felt like when I watched that crystallized for me that the changes that we have to make to be able to make holistic food have far-reaching social and economic kind of implications.
This book, edible, plant-based,
dairy-free,
gluten-free,
naturally
sweetened
whole foods.
Whole foods.
It's quite a mouthful.
Yeah, and it's a big book. It's got not just recipes, it's a digestive information.
It took me a little while after I finished it to realise what it was that I'd created. And I was driving along one day and the word manifesto came into my head, and I was like, what's a manifesto? And I googled it and I was like, I made my manifesto. I really wanted to package a lot of complex ideas about society into a digestible form. So it's a cook, nutrition and lifestyle book. So it has over 200 recipes that are all in full colour, but it also has most of the pages have next to the recipe that a full page of information. I aim to make all the recipes as simple as possible so that they were not only quick and easy but not intimidating to people who didn't cook much, because I think increasingly cooking is kind of a dying art. Information on all the different topics relating to food production, mental health, sustainability, digestion, gut bacteria, all that kind of stuff. Edible has a strong emphasis on gut health. So I have irritable bowel syndrome, which basically just means that I have certain food sensitivities and certain foods that I can't digest, and that's what really spurred me to write about gut health. But the more that I looked into and studied gut health, the more I started to draw wider conclusions about the way that gut health kind of mirrors the health of Mother Earth. So in the same way that the body needs a good balance, a balance of good and bad bacteria, so does the soil that food grows in. So it needs a good amount of good bacteria to kind of, so in the human body, good bacteria creates nutrients that can be absorbed into the blood, and bacteria in the soil helps nutrients to be absorbed into food. So what happens when we treat a human being with full antibiotics, or when we grow food using pesticides and herbicides, is that we end up with nutrient devoid food that isn't strong and can't protect itself. And then in the same way that in the human body, when you don't have enough good bacteria, bad bacteria can easily come and overwhelm you, whether it be acne or digestive problems, or there's a whole range of things that are now linked to bacteria, from heart disease, asthma, like allergies in general, not just food allergies, but hypersensitivity to other environmental things. Like if the plants aren't strong, if they're not grown in soil that's diverse in bacteria and has been composted and has worms and bugs in it, then they're more vulnerable to like things like locust plagues. I really like drawing those connections between the earth as a functioning human like ecosystem, in the same way that the human is a functioning ecosystem that has its own wisdom and can heal itself. And so really looking at growing food in local, sustainable, small-scale, holistic food systems, and treating the human body in the same way, whether it be using herbs and supplements to regain a sense of homeostasis, and then letting the body's own wisdom heal itself.
So how does organic food or biodynamic food affect any of that?
The easiest way to talk about the value or the benefit of organic or biodynamic or permaculture, like holistic food, is holistic food doesn't have a benefit in and of itself, apart from the fact it just doesn't have all of the drawbacks of industrialized farming. But when you industrialize farming and you do it on a large scale, there's so many different problems that stem from that, whether it be like runoff of synthetic water-soluble fertilizers that causes algae blooms in the ocean. It kills the marine biodiversity. When there's algae blooms, there's not enough oxygen for all the other animals to survive in the ocean. So there's far-reaching implications of that, but for the ecosystem of the earth, but then for the human as well. Like if you use synthetic fertilizers, then you end up with higher levels of oxalic acid and phytates in the food, and they bind to nutrients. So even though scientific journals might say, there's the same level of all the nutrients in the organic and the non-organic food, there's higher levels of these anti-nutrients that can really affect overall health and well-being. There's a lot of phytochemicals, so plant-based nutrients that haven't been classified by science yet, that are only just being discovered, that are richer in fresh whole food, and that can't necessarily be replicated synthetically. So just looking at having fresh food that you eat while it's still living, and not that's like a dead kind of replica. So I'm flicking to the end notes, the section on microwaving, which is in Tea and Lifestyle.
You mean you don't know how many thousand pages in there?
Yeah, well I just want to get the quote exactly right. And there have been reports of plants not growing when watered with microwaved water. However, no published peer-reviewed studies exist to support this assertion. For an overview of microwaving concerns, see Melnick 2005 Inside the Magic Box, which concludes it's probably more harmful to stress over the potential consequences of eating microwaved food than it actually is just to eat it. It was based in macrobiotic theory. So macrobiotics looks at the yin and yang of all different life and weather and food and energy in general, and the way that all interplays, and looking at balancing that. And from a macrobiotic perspective, not only do you not want to microwave, but you also don't want to cook with electricity at all. So you're looking at mainly using like a natural sources of heat, like gas, to cook food. And that is I think it's a good ideal, and also cooking in, in ceramic instead of in metal. I also think though that contextually that's a difficult ideal for a lot of people to live up to, and I think if the choice is between like eating takeout or reheating good quality slow cooker that you've cooked and then frozen in your freezer and you reheat in the microwave, I think that there needs to be a balance of practicalities in modern life. And often the more that you elevate your vibration, the more that you cleanse your body and pay attention to the way that you feel about things, the more sensitive you become to things like that. So people, for example, like I feel similarly about eating spinach that comes from the supermarket as opposed to spinach that I grow in my garden. Like this is a completely different feel and a completely different taste. That said, all of the studies that have been done on the benefits of fruit and vegetables have been done on conventionally farmed fruit and veg, and you still see benefits. So I think it's a sliding scale of harm and harm minimization.
And at the back of your book, you've got, if you were queen of the world, 12, what would you do? Your 12
I'm gonna get shy talking about this. I have 12 if I was queen of the world, and this bit goes right in the back because I feel like it's an opinion piece. So the first one is about water and the way that we handle water. I think when people talk about saving water, that doesn't really make much sense to me, because if you look at the planet holistically, there's a certain amount of water that's always on the planet. So water can't be saved because when you use it, it's not going to die. But I think that the problem is that we mismanage water, so we don't take responsibility for the water that we do have. So I think rather than saying I can't have a shower because I need to save water, I think that what we need to be looking at instead is saying what happens to the water once I shower in it. Because if it's going to be mixed with a whole heap of rubbish and then put out into the water, yes, that's into the ocean, that's a waste. But if we're looking at, I have a shower and then it goes out and waters my veggie garden, then having a shower is not an issue. There's a meme of a child in Africa where obviously clean water is really hard to come by, and he's going like this, and it says, "You mean to tell me you shit in perfectly clean water?" We're looking at in the modern world, we use for our toilets clean water that we could be drinking, or that we could be that could end up going on the garden. And so just looking at using water holistically in a way that kind of recreates an ecosystem rather than generating toxic waste.
I mean, shower wastewater makes obvious sense to have in your toilet.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. But also on a larger scale, most of the water that is used by industry and agriculture, and so that leads on to the second point. The second one is just about the dairy industry and the fact that we use way too much milk and how much water that uses up and how much waste it generates. So just looking at the economic but also the ecosystem cost of the foods that we are eating, which aren't necessarily beneficial to human health. Another one would be abolition of the dominant human myth. So this idea that we can improve or control on the way that things are naturally created. And I think that usually comes at a cost, whether it be like the creation of polyunsaturated margarine, which was supposedly meant to be an improvement on butter, which we're now finding is actually a disaster for heart health, or there's many different things. We thought that we could improve on the way that we farm, but then that comes with really detrimental impacts, not just for human nutrition.
Angela, so where do you see the future? What's after edible?
Oh gosh, as I said before, when I started edible, I thought it was going to take 3 months. It was initially going to be 125 pages, and I was going to print it at Officeworks, and it kind of took a couple of more years of my life. I'd like to start working more with herbal medicine and to study naturopathy and work teaching groups about using food and herbs and things to heal the interior milieu of the body.
And what's your website?
So I have a blog at edibleangela.com, and you can purchase the book from ediblethebook.com. Ediblethebook.com.
Ediblethebook.com.
The book, Mary.
Ediblethebook.com. Awesome. That's getting better than this. Thanks, Angela Flack.
I'm not sure how much you guys know about cooperatives, but a food cooperative is when a bunch of people get together and they say we're going to organise our own food supply. And not only are we going to organise our own food supply, but we're going to make sure that the food that we purchase has integrity.